Bipolar disorder is the main focus of this presentation, prepared as a comprehensive guide to mental health and bipolar disorder awareness, presented to you by Group 9. Bipolar disorder is a lifelong mood disorder which has two main types, bipolar disorder 1 and bipolar disorder 2, with a special mention of cyclothymia. It is characterized by alternating and recurrent episodes of mania, hypomania, and depression. Mania is a period of abnormally elevated or irritable moods accompanied by very high energy and activity levels. Manic episodes also significantly impair daily functioning and may sometimes require hospitalization. Hypomania is a milder form of mania. It also involves increased energy and confidence, but the symptoms are less severe and do not cause major functional impairments. Episodes of depression are periods of persistently low moods, reduced energy, and loss of interest, which are often accompanied by impaired daily functioning. Different types of bipolar disorders are BD1, BD2, and cyclothymia. BD1 individuals have experienced one or more episodes of mania. Most people with BD1 will have episodes of both mania and depression, but an episode of depression isn't necessary for a diagnosis. To be diagnosed with BD1, the manic episodes must last at least 7 days or be so severe that one may need hospitalization. BD2 individuals have experienced depressive episodes or hypomanic episodes, but they never experience a full manic episode as a characteristic of bipolar disorder 1. Cyclothymia is a chronic bipolar spectrum condition marked by mild hypomanic and depressive symptoms. Although it is classified under bipolar disorders in DSM-5, overlapping features with other conditions and limited clinical studies makes its classification complex. Other types of bipolar disorders include bipolar and related disorders by certain drugs or alcohol or due to medical conditions such as Cushing's disease and multiple sclerosis or stroke. Rapid cycling bipolar is an experience of depressive, manic, hypomanic, or mixed episodes at least 4 times within a year.
In this part of our presentation, I'm going to talk about the inner world of individuals living with bipolar disorder type 1 and 2. We are exploring their lives through 3 intersecting areas. First, the benefit versus burden dialectic. For many, bipolar disorder isn't just a list of problems. During manic phases, individuals often experience what we call positive attributes, like a massive boost in creativity, energy, and productivity. However, this is always balanced against a heavy burden. This includes emotional distress, financial risks, and deep functional impairment in their daily lives. It's a constant tug-of-war between these two sides. The second area is the focus of experience, self versus other. This is about where the experience actually happens. On one hand, there is the internal focus, which is the self. This is how the person feels inside, those intense subjective highs and lows. On the other hand, there is the other, or the external world. This involves social stigma, how family and friends are affected, and how society perceives their behavior. Often, how the person feels inside and how the world sees them are two completely different stories. Finally, we see a trajectory from inexpressible to meaningful. In early stage, these experiences are often inexpressible. They feel chaotic, fragmented, and simply beyond words. But over time, through therapy and reflection, individuals begin meaning making. They start to build a personal narrative, turning that initial chaos into a life story that actually makes sense to them.
I would now like to explain what might be happening in the brain during these mood changes in a way that helps us better understand bipolar disorder and reduce stigma around misunderstanding as simply mood swings. The research titled Tracing the Psychopathology of Bipolar Disorder to the Functional Architecture of Intrinsic Brain Activity and its Neurotransmitter Modulation provides evidence that 3 core resting state networks play a key role in bipolar disorder. First, the sensory motor network, which is primarily involved in processing sensory input from the external world and generating motor output. It is closely linked to psychomotor activity, and dopamine plays a key role. And in bipolar mania, increased dopaminergic drive enhances SMN activity, which helps explain symptoms such as psychomotor agitation, impulsivity, and increased goal-directed behavior. In contrast, reduced dopaminergic signaling in depression is associated with SMN hyperactivity, psychomotor slowing, or feeling exhausted and unable to initiate actions. Second, the salience network integrates internal bodily signals and assigns emotional significance to stimuli. Basically, this network helps the brain decide what feels important. It underlies affective experience, including emotional reactivity, irritability, and motivational states. In manic states, increased SN activity corresponds to emotional liability and increased reactivity, whereas in depressive states, reduced salience processing is linked to the emotional blunting and anhedonia. Third, the default mode network, which supports internal limb-oriented mental processes such as self-referential thinking, memory, and spontaneous thought. In bipolar depression, this network can become too dominant. As a result, increased DMN activity is associated with repetitive negative thoughts or excessive rumination and inward-focused thought. In mania, however, DMN activity is often reduced, poorly regulated, which contributes to the distractibility and fragmented thinking. What's especially important is that these networks do not work in isolation. Their balance is regulated by chemical messengers in the brain, especially by dopamine and serotonin. These chemicals help tune the brain toward action, emotion, or reflection. Shifts in this balance can push the brain toward excessive activity, emotional overload, or inward withdrawal, creating the different mood episodes people experience.
Now, I will focus on how mood episodes in bipolar disorder emerge from the combined effects of brain circuit dysfunction and disrupted intracellular signaling pathways. Mood regulation depends on the coordinated activity of several key brain regions, especially the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, hippocampus, and the HPA axis. In bipolar disorder, the system becomes imbalanced rather than completely damaged. The prefrontal cortex, which normally regulates emotions and impulsive behaviors, shows reduced functional control. At the same time, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, leading to exaggerated emotional responses, particularly during manic or depressive episodes. The hippocampus, which is sensitive to stress, is affected by prolonged exposure to high cortisol levels. This is closely linked to the dysregulation of HPA axis, resulting in abnormal stress responses and sustained cortisol release, which further destabilize mood. Beyond these brain regions, intracellular signaling pathways play a crucial role. Pathways such as CAMP-CREB, PKC, MAPK, and GSK3 regulate gene expression, synaptic plasticity, and neuronal survival. In bipolar disorder, these pathways do not function properly, leading to impaired communication between neurons and reduced ability of the brain to adapt to emotional stressors. From the interactive perspective, together dysregulation of CAMP-CREB, PKC, MAPK, and GSK3 pathways leads to impaired synaptic plasticity, altered gene expression, and reduced neuronal resilience. These molecular abnormalities interact with dysfunctional brain circuits and stress-related hormonal changes, ultimately giving rise to the recurrent and unstable mood episodes characteristic of bipolar disorder. In summary, mood episodes in bipolar disorder arise from the interaction between impaired top-down emotional control, heightened stress sensitivity, and disrupted intracellular signaling mechanism. This combined dysfunction helps explain why mood episodes are recurrent, intense, and difficult to regulate in individuals with bipolar disorder.
In this part, I will explain how genetic vulnerability and environmental factors interact to trigger mood episodes in bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder has a strong heritable component, meaning genetics play a critical role in increasing probability. Several key genes have been linked to bipolar disorder, which can influence ion channel functions, regulate intracellular signaling, and also control sleep-wake rhythms. In addition, some of them are required for synaptic plasticity, and circadian clock genes such as clock also plays a critical role in the bipolar disorder. However, the most important part is to understand that genes do not directly cause bipolar disorder. Instead, they increase biological sensitivity, making the brain more responsive to environmental stresses. Some environmental factors can act as triggers that can activate this vulnerable system, such as acute or chronic stress. which can stimulate the HPA axis, increasing cortisol levels and altering limbic system activity. And on the other hand, individuals who has a trauma background can lead to long-lasting epigenetic changes, sensitizing the stress response system and increasing what we call allostatic load, or the cumulative wear and tear from chronic stress. Sleep deprivation and circadian rhythm disruption directly interfere with clock gene function and disturbs neurotransmitter balance, especially dopamine and serotonin. In addition, substance use alters synaptic transmission and can cause a process known as kindling, where repeated exposure lowers the threshold for future mood episodes. In conclusion, these triggers initiate a neurobiological cascade. First, the environmental factor impacts genetically sensitized neural circuits. Then, prefrontal cortex control weakens, allowing the amygdala to become more hyperactive and the HPA axis to remain persistently activated. This disrupts the important intracellular signaling pathways such as protein kinase C, and as a result of that, occurring changes in gene expression and neural functions. And as for the network level, this results in large-scale brain network coupling, ultimately producing either a manic or depressive episode in bipolar disorder.
Bipolar disorder is a long-term mental illness characterized by significant mood swings. Individuals with this condition may sometimes be excessively energetic, quick-witted, and prone to risky behaviors. Conversely, they may experience intense unhappiness, lack of motivation, and fatigue. These changes are related to imbalances in the brain's mood-regulating systems. The primary goal of current treatments is to reduce these sudden mood swings and enable the individuals to maintain a more stable state of mind for daily life. Treatments work by regulating the balance of chemicals in the brain, such as dopamine and serotonin. The most commonly used medication in bipolar disorder treatment are mood stabilizers. Lithium in particular is a well-known and long-used medication in this field. Lithium reduces excessive brain stimulation, protects brain cells, and decreases the frequency of mood swings. It also helps regulate sleep patterns and is known for its suicidal risk-reducing effect. Other medications such as valproic acid, carbamazepine, and lamotrigine also help control manic and depressive episodes by calming the brain's overactivity. Some medications are more effective, especially during manic episodes, while others are more effective in preventing depressive episodes. Atypical antipsychotics also play an important role in treatment. These medications reduce manic, depressive, and psychotic symptoms by balancing chemicals in the brain that affect mood and thought processes. In addition to medication, psychotherapy, regular sleep, stress management, and healthy lifestyle habits increase the success of treatment. In some severe and treatment-resistant cases, electroconvulsive therapy and brain stimulation techniques can offer effective options. In conclusion, although bipolar disorder cannot be completely eliminated, it is a disease that can be controlled with the right treatment and regular follow-up. With appropriate support, individuals with bipolar disorder can lead productive, balanced, and healthy lives.